Hello, welcome back to I Got Board Game. Saturday!
Changed up.
Change up. I mean, obviously we want to record on Fridays. It's been rough for me, I would say, at least. And so sorry if this just throws you off. But we will still shoot for Friday. I think it's just kind of the way we started, so I want to kind of keep with that for now. But this is coming to you on Saturday, which actually will probably be uploaded late, and you'll see it Sunday. So either way, anyway, today we are looking at a game that admittedly I have not much experience with, though I've looked into it a bit. Obviously, since getting the game, I backed it on Kickstarter, actually. And so I was invested, but I just haven't played it that much at all. And so John will hopefully have more opinions, thoughts on this game today. And I will kind of be forming my rating review while we're going. So, which is fine, because that's usually how our discussion should be, right? Kind of just free flow. But anyways, so today, the game we are looking at is called
Asian bartering.
Asian
Just
bartering.
Just kidding. The game
$5
that we are doing today is
Bargain Quest. So Bargain Quest is a game by Renegade Games, which is a really small company that started a few years ago. I want to say maybe at most like 5 years ago. And they're maybe mainly, I think, just two people running the whole thing. Maybe they gotten a couple more employees over time, but they're also, I think, remote, so they don't actually have like a set office space, though I think they're based in San Diego technically. And so they're small, but then when they came out with their first big game, Clank, which was huge for them, that really got them on the map, and they've actually put out a lot of games since then. I think maybe even up to like they have like 10 games so far published within that short amount of time, with just that few number of people working in the company. And so Bargain Quest is for let me look at the box.
2 to 6.
Yes, 2 to 6 players, plays in, it says, in 45 minutes. I think I would imagine 45 if it is up toward the higher player counts, right?
Mm-hmm.
The lower can definitely be closer to 30 minutes, I would think. And so with that, Bargain Quest is a game where you are trying to run your own shop in kind of this fantasy world, right? Run your own shop to supply heroes with the goods and weapons and such that they need to go fight monsters and defend the town. And then basically, if the heroes who came to your shop start, fighting well, surviving, coming back, then your store kind of goes up in reputation. And so that's the theme, which is very interesting. That's kind of the thing that caught my attention initially, where you aren't the fantasy heroes, you're the shops providing the items for the heroes to go fight. And you want your shop to do well, have more customers, or go up in reputation. So very clever theme. And so with that, we will go into a very quick overview of the flow of the game, and then we'll get into our review. And so switching over to our picture of the game set up. So here is a picture of the game set up. I gotta keep it like that. And so in this game, each player has their own player board, or their what's known as their like shop board, in front of them. And so there's 3 players in this setup. And what's cool about the shop board is, I'll show it again later, but I'm holding one right now, where you could see the shop on the front, and each one has different art. So it's kind of cool that they, got different art, different styles of shops. This one in the picture is like a magic shop. This one's more like a Asian looking shop, right? And then, but what happens is for each player board, you actually flip it up to open your actual player board, and you get to go inside your store, which is really cool. And so anyway, each player has their shop. And so each round has 6 steps, 6 phases. And you're basically going to go through these steps as many times as it takes to defeat 3 monsters. So each game is set up to fight through level 1, 2, and 3 monster. And so the first step is a supply phase, where from the deck of item cards, you're going to deal a certain number out to each player, and then it's going to be a round of drafting, basically drafting the cards to see your starting hand for that round. And that's basically your supply, your items that your shop will be selling during that round. And then after that is the display phase, which is called that because you're going to choose one of the cards in your hand to put into your shop's display. And that's just a specific spot of your board to basically say that's like the item you're putting by the window to attract heroes to your store. And so that'll matter because items have certain class icons or types which match certain hero types. So you have to put a type that you want to attract that hero, that kind of hero, to your store that round. And then after that, you go on to shopping. So after you put up your display item, you'll go in order depending on the item itself and how charming it is to see which player gets to attract which hero. And then you're going to sell from your hand then the items that you have available to that hero based on how much money they have. And again, based on what class they are, because they can only use equipment that fit their class. And so you'll sell that, you'll get the money from the heroes that you sell to. So that's how your shop is making money. And then you go into the next phase, which is the adventure phase, which is when those heroes that came to your shops go out to fight the monster that's revealed for that round. And to do that fighting, each hero will be given a random adventure card, which is kind of a random bonus or buff or debuff. So it could be a positive or negative to the hero's attack or defense or stuff like that. And then you'll compare their stats to the monster and see if you hit the monster and if your hero survives. And so if they hit, they wound the monster, your store gets basically a fame point or reputation point, the victory points of the game. And if your hero survives and isn't killed by the monster hitting back, you also get another point for your shop because you did so well in supplying your hero. And then you go on to, after everyone resolves their fighting and seeing who survives or not, you go on to step 5, which is upgrading. So with the money you have, you can choose to either buy some kind of upgrade for your display or storage, which is how many cards you can hold on to and carry into the next round of items to sell. Or you can even hire employees, which can give a certain ability usually, and sometimes it's one-time ability. I think they're usually one-time.
Usually one time, but they
could be ongoing. Right? And then the last part is storage, which is where you can, from the remaining cards you didn't sell, you can choose a certain number to store into the next round.
Including the display item.
Including whatever you had set up as display. And so you'll just repeat this step until the heroes that have gone out adventuring each round does enough damage to defeat the monster. And then you'll go on to the level 2, then level 3 monster. And once the last monster is defeated, or once all the heroes in the deck that are possible die, like you all let them die, that triggers the end of the game. All the heroes dying, or you collectively defeated the level 3 monster. And then you'll count up which shop has the most points. And then also money converts into points, right, at a certain rate. And then you'll see who has the most points, and that is a shop that did the best, and that is the winner. And so that is an overview of the game. And so we will come back here. I do have some other pictures that we can bring up as we're explaining, so if that helps kind of point out certain cards. But starting with John, actually,
Should we start with you? Because I have a lot of experience with this game. So
even though I've been talking a lot, I'm going to talk a little more because I just have a few thoughts to say first. And we'll start with the pros, right? The good things. I really like the theme. Like, whether it's how I described in the beginning of like not being the heroes, but you supply the heroes. It's like, that's just a little funny sidestep from a very traditional and common theme. But then I also really like thematically the artwork. I'm going to show a few of the cards here. And I think it's just really charming. Like I was saying, whether it's like a shop board, where it's like this, I think is a promo one I have. It's like, oh, I run a game shop, board game shop. And then you open it and you see the inside, and it's cool. It's like a whole setup display of what the inside of the shop would look like. And I think that's really cool. It's like not just keeping your board static of like only this side or only the outside, but they give you both pieces of art, and it works in this kind of thematic way of opening up your shop to go inside it. And then I also really like the small details of like, it tells you like where you put your upgrade cards to this side, employees to this side, your display card goes on here. And then it also has a reminder of each phase of the round, right? Supply, display, shopping, and so on. And so it's functional, right? It has a really good thematic touch to it, nice, vibrant artwork, but then it's also very functional and a good reminder of how to play the game. And then when it comes to, say, the heroes, here are some, like the cleric. These are some of the initial ones, but sorry, I think I went on to employees. But yeah, I think like the artwork is, again, very vibrant, but it has a certain like charm in its style that it's like not, it's like, it's slightly cute, I would say, but it doesn't go too far cute because it still keeps that kind of like fighting fantasy game feel to the art. And so, yeah, and it has like, each hero has like their attack, defense, their class, how much money they come into your shop with, the name of the hero, like this is the mage up there, if you can see it. And so it's all like capturing that fantasy feel very well, that theme. So that's kind of like the initial things I would say. And I will let John go on this and probably jump back in if there's certain points you touch upon too.
As we do. But yeah, kind of going back into that idea, the flipping of the concept of like who you're playing as the theme. So I think it's actually, that's a very important thing to remember and understand about this game is you are not the adventurers, you are the shopkeepers. And the object of a shopkeeper is to make money and to have a great reputation. So that is what you're aiming for in this game. Technically, the objective of the game is not necessarily to kill all the monsters in that sense. It is to make the most money and have the best reputation compared to all the other shopkeepers. But, of course, as we were saying, there are a lot of ways. And I think that's why it's very important because, as we were saying, there is a certain point in the game, which is kind of the fun part of the drafting. And as you're playing this game is there's a few different strategies you can take on of selling items to the heroes, right? So obviously we were saying there are ways to get the points where when the adventurers go out, they can damage the monsters, and you can also, get victory points when they survive, right? Because it's kind of the idea of like, you sold them equipment where they can live to tell the tale that, hey, at least his equipment kept me alive, so go to this shop, right? It's kind of that idea. Or like, I was able to wound him and survive, so, because I bought my items from here. So I'm going to go there again. Maybe he'll give me more items. So that's one way you can play the game. But there's another way you can play the game where you just sell these heroes a bunch of items, make a lot of money, and they die. or you, like, they can hurt the monster and then they die, because you still get a point for hurting the monster. You just don't get a point for them coming back to the town. But it's like, hey, like the monster's dying. I don't know. That hero just didn't seem to know how to take care of himself. So
no, yeah,
so you can play a few different ways in this game, and I think that's
idea of
the
like
fun parts.
Selling just to get money. I mean, the game does have cards that let you do that, right? Like where certain cards are like, maybe the cost written on it is this, but then you could actually sell it for this much, and it's like, I just gouged this hero for money.
Yeah, or you sell them an item that doesn't actually have a use. Yeah. But it is worth money, so you sell them like a map. And like technically the map does nothing for the hero stats wise, but it's still worth 5 gold. So I just took 5 gold off of this adventure. This is great. So there's stuff like that in the game. And I think the really the fun parts of the game is the first 2 steps, which is the drafting and the display. So I think one of the things that's really cool about this is, like, in a typical drafting game, you're usually trying to just get the best items, right? Like if you were to play a normal drafting game, you're looking usually for just high quality or high tier cards in and of themselves. But what the unique thing about this game is the fact that even if you're getting these cards, it's also important, as we were talking about, with the display stage. So in order to sell items, you have to have the hero come to your shop. And so just picking the best items in the draft may not be the right strategy, because the best items might be for a certain class icon, right? So there's 4 different class icons. There's the red for the mages, there's the blue for the warriors or fighters, there's green for rogues, and then there's like a yellow light for like clerics, right? So there's 4 different class types, and all of the heroes are going to have a different range of them. So when you're playing through the game, your hero lineup might be different, you know, as you're going through the game, as heroes are dying or coming back, or like there's a hero that has a lot of money on them. So you're like, hey, I can make a lot of money off of this hero, but you have to get them to your store. So in order to do that, as we were saying, is the display step, which is a very important one. So when you take the cards in the draft, you have to play it, and there's 2 things that are important. It's the class icon, because heroes will only go to your shop if, you know, if you have an item that's attracting them, and the like the charm or the allure of the card, which is these heart symbols on them. So the more hearts you have is like, ooh, that's a really attractive item for those classes. So those people will want to go to your store first if you have the most allure, right? So it's very important, because that is how you get the heroes to actually come, so you can sell them the items. So
Yeah, and I think to kind of add to those phases, because those, when you describe like what you're doing during those, it's really simple, right?
mm-hmm.
But what you're breaking down is like the kind of thought process behind it, which
Mm-hmm.
makes it interesting, because I like drafting in games, right? I think I mentioned it in other reviews where drafting is maybe one of my favorite mechanics, even though it's such a simple thing. It's kind of more like a board game kind of mechanic, though, right? Other people who don't play board games might not be as familiar with it. Maybe more so nowadays because of, you know, those games that are like involving or basically imitating board games, right? But to have drafting, though, in a lot of games is also, it's often paired with like set collection, and that's the simple thinking of like, just draft the best thing, like you're mentioning, that fits my sets. But then in this one, it's not about set collection, it's about kind of a little more long term than that, right? Where you're trying to get the hero that hopefully can get you the money, and then hopefully you have the items for them to get you the points later, right? And so it's a few steps ahead that you're maybe trying to think of which item to actually draft. And then with that, going on to the display phase, I think the clever thing, but both again thematically and mechanically, is that the card you put as your display, one, it's exciting because even though it's a little short phase, you're all putting it face down and then revealing it at the same time. So it's not like you're, you know, just like seeing what other people displayed and then going back and forth on what to play. Like it has that cool kind of simultaneous play to it, which makes it exciting, where then you can reveal and be like, why are we all going for this one hero that's showing right now? You all suck, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But then, so there's that excitement there. But then the cool thematic part to it is that the card that you're putting on display, you can't sell during the shopping phase after, which is just a small touch, but I think it's really clever, right? Because it makes it sometimes a difficult choice where it's like, ooh, I really want to sell this item because it's worth a lot. Oh, but the rest of my items can maybe be sold to that class, so I need to put that card as the display this round, you know? And so it kind of can put you in a spot where you have to have a little tough decision to make, right? It's not like long paths of thinking, but just in that small choice, it's like, which one am I displaying and not selling, basically, for this one round? And then obviously you'll get it back in your hand and can sell or display it next round. But to kind of repeat that small little phase every round has that little excitement to it too. And then
yeah, and I think that's one of the things too about this game is like all of these decisions you make are not huge decisions that you have to make once and then you just see how it plays out and that's it. It's you make a lot of decisions that are important, but they're just quick, and it's you can almost see the immediate effects or the kind of the impacts right away, though there is long-term implications behind some of them sometimes. But it's this idea where it feels like the flow goes forward, right? You're not just waiting for a long period of time and then you're just stuck. And also at the end of it, in these drafting rounds, if you happen to not match and you just don't, attract anybody at all, you will get somebody, right? Because there's enough heroes for every player whenever you play the game. That's how many heroes you flip over. So you're always going to get a hero. It's not like you're ever going to miss out on a hero. Just might not be the hero that you want because you may not be able to sell them very much, but at least you'll always have at least the chance of selling some items to the heroes.
And the cool thing with the heroes, like, because that's kind of, in a sense, the very beginning step, right? Like the setup of each round, seeing what heroes are available. Like, that's something to keep in mind if it wasn't clear from our little rules run through, is that the heroes are going to either return, or the ones that did not survive, died, will be replaced, right? So you'll have new heroes. It's not kind of like the same set of heroes every round after round, right? There's a whole deck of heroes that then you get new ones. And then the cool thing with that is that they have abilities, which I like, right? Which is an interesting way of doing variable player powers, right? Because again, what John emphasized was that you're not the heroes, right? And so you, in a sense, you're not playing this game to become attached to them as you would if you were playing an actual like role-playing game and you are that character. And so you, in a sense, aren't supposed to get attached, but you could just for fun, if you like a certain hero or a certain class. But then there are going to be other ones that cycle out. They have their own abilities, and that might make them appealing. And then that, when you have them go adventuring, in a sense, on your behalf or representing your story, that's like when you get to use their player power, if you will. And so it's an interesting way of getting at the same idea of a player power, but thematically it's different.
It is different. And I think one of the interesting things that you're pointing out there too, which I also really like about this concept of like the attachment and trying to remember that you're a shopkeeper ultimately, and that, that's your job, is that the way that heroes continue to make or like have money and give you money, right? So as we were talking about, there's an adventuring phase. So they go out and fight the monster. So one of the things that's important, of course, is if they hit the monster, you gain points. And then if they survive, you gain points. But there's another aspect too, is if the monster lives or dies, right? So if the monster lives, surviving heroes will get a kind of paycheck, I guess you could call it, or loot that they find as they went out for that particular adventure. So any of the surviving heroes that survive get a small amount of money back. So they do get money, but it's not nearly as much money as most of the heroes have, especially when they first show up in town, right? Or they first show up on the board. Usually you only get a pretty solid amount when the monster is actually killed off, and it's a different reward amount, right? So while you can get attached to your heroes in that way, one of the things to also keep in mind is like there are some heroes that are a lot better at surviving than others in terms of like fights or getting through these fights, but they may not be giving you a lot of money in the future for you to sell to get more money off of. So it's one of those things where it's like, yes, you might like them because they can survive and they can net you points in that way. But one, you have to be able to sell them the items to keep surviving, and they might not have the money to do it. Or two, the fact that they just don't have a lot of money on them anymore. So is it really worth it for them to keep patronizing your shop because they're kind of poor boys now? So,
But then there also is, if I remember, is there like a class or a character ability, hero ability, or like an item that could also help them make more money if they survive or something like that?
Yeah. So and that's also the beauty of some of the items too. There's some that if they survive or they fight and they complete beating the monster or wounding it, they can make money. There is an item, it might not be this one, it might be the expansion for the game, which maybe we'll talk about later, but that if the hero dies and they have the item, then the shopkeeper who gave them the item gets money when they die. It's like a deed or a will or something like that, or a loan. So
that's funny.
there's a lot of different ways to also make money in that way. So it's not only just pure stats to make the points or just at the end of the loot. There are other ways to also kind of tailor it. There's also employees that we were talking about a little bit, and the upgrades that you can make in your shop too. So kind of jumping into that side of it too, it's not just that your shop is, stagnant and all you do is just draft cards for displaying stuff. But as we said before, there are some upgrades. So it does cost gold. So you're actually using points in a sense, your victory points or your accrued value stuff.
Because I think
upgrades,
money is like every 10 money is a point at the end of the game.
Yeah, and the upgrades don't give you points at the end of the game, right? So those don't provide you up things, but they can do a lot of bonuses. So there's two primary upgrades, which is the storage, which allows you to carry over items into the next draft or into the next round, right? So it gives you more opportunities for what you can put on display or what you might want to, so you can either upgrade the display to add more items in the display, or you can put stuff in your storage so you can have more items in storage so you can carry it over into the next round and just have more items to sell or to potentially choose from display, right? And Ben is showing them right here. So these are pretty solid upgrades. They can be helpful in some ways if it's part of the strategy that you need to utilize, right? So like display is nice if you find that another player is always beating you to heroes that you want, and they always seem to just get a better draft than you, because the display allows you to get more hearts to attract the heroes, or it allows you to choose a wider range of heroes, right? Because you can put more symbols that show up in the display. And then the same thing with the storage upgrade. It allows you to just have more cards. So you can keep more cards over turns. So then you might have this really valuable card that is great for drawing people in. And then you just want to have more cards to sell to people. Because like last time you left a hero and they left your shop with 5 gold. And you're like, I could have gotten 5 gold if I had one more item. So this is another way to help, right? So those are the shop upgrades. And then there's also the employees right? So
you can hire
a bunch of different employees that can do different things. So the cost is in the top left, and they all have varying powers. Some of them are one-time use, so you use it and it'll protect, and then you lose that employee. There are some that just stay with you, right? It's a continuous power. So some give bonuses. You can see on the cards they give bonuses depending on the symbols that they might have. Some are when you sell items, you can plus or minus it by 5. Right, to the cost of the card. So then you can either sell something that's technically more valuable, but you're kind of giving them a discount, or you can charge them more, even though it's not worth that much money. And then some can steal upgrades or items from other players from their displays or their storage rooms. Or some of these cards also allow you to actually sell the item in your display, right? So you can circumvent that ability, right?
And so, yeah, I think in describing this phase of like the upgrades after the adventuring and even after the storage phase, right? What I like about these phases is it kind of more fully brings you into the theme of running a shop, right? Because if you didn't have these phases where you're actually doing stuff with your shop and your items, then I think the theme could just be you running a shop in concept, but the way it actually plays is you're still the hero, right? You're the hero that came to the shop, you spent the money, got the item, and went fighting. And so, but then to actually have these steps where it's like you then are, in a sense, maintaining, improving your store, getting an employee, figuring out what items you want to keep for the next round of customers, if you will. Like, then it kind of, fully pushes you into this theme again of like, you're running the shop, right? Again, it's not those heroes that came by. And then I also like thematically how like the employees are like also have their own titles, right? Which are very much from like fantasy tropes and stuff, right? The smuggler, the armor smith, and the alchemist, right? Those are all very fantasy like things, but they brought them in as employees instead of even being heroes, right? Just like a whole deck of even more heroes. It's a different deck of employees that then help the shop this way versus coming as heroes and customers. And then overall, I do like how these phases, again, this upgrade phase and the following storage phase, kind of pushes the game to that step of building up a little bit, right, over time. Because without that too, the game could just feel like everything resets every round, but it doesn't fully reset, right? You have some items that can carry over, or you have some new things that your shop can do. And so it adds to the feel of the game, like the actual playing feel of it, which I really like, that it is still building in some way and even diverging from other players. Again, not being such a light game where it's just every phase is just new heroes, you get what you can, then just repeat,
Yep. Exactly.
And then actually, I did mention pictures. I should have shown these actually when we were talking about them earlier. And so, I mean, these are like the pictures for the final phases, some of the employees, some of the generic upgrades to the shop itself. And then you have different monsters that you fight. And so this part, actually, these cards are kind of relating to the adventuring, right? You have hero cards. And like what I was saying before, I think, like, at least even in this picture, they look so vibrant, right? With all the kind of colors and the icons, which are very visible. I think the only thing that might not be as visible is the name of the hero themselves. It's like in that weird, like, shadowed font. So it's a little hard to read in this picture, I would say, unless you look up close or looking at the card a little closely. But again, I really like kind of the art style. It has a little kind of cutesy, little kind of kid-friendly to it, but it's still like, you could clearly tell it's kind of like this fantasy theme with color and like, going adventuring. But so your heroes have their abilities, but then we mentioned their attack and defense. And so then that's what you'll end up, when they go adventuring, you'll be modifying it with a random adventure card, which is also cool because these could have all just been random buffs or debuffs, but they also gave them names to kind of fit it thematically, right? Like someone who's reckless is like less defense, but like more attack, or hasty is like kind of like unprepared, so they also have less defense. Someone who's reliable is just like consistent. And then someone who's like clever has extra defense, right? Able to plan for things. And so these are all just generally small buffs, but they can make that difference, because what ends up happening during the adventure phase is you're taking your hero from your shop and then giving them one of these random buffs or debuffs, and then you're comparing their stats to the defense and attack on the monster to see if they wound the monster, or if the hero dies themselves. And so those are pictures to see what that looks like. And I think it's an interesting idea that you're all fighting the monsters together still, right? It would be very kind of a common theme if it's like you're all heroes on a team together going fighting. But in a sense, here you're a step back. You're the shops who want to keep, obviously, your town safe, because your shop would go out of business if you're all dead. But you want your hero who's going out there with these other heroes to do better than those heroes, so that your store does better. So it's just funny. It's funny to think about. And yeah, the art on here is nice. And I think going all the way back, this is just kind of a picture of like an open shop with a card that's faced up on the display. And these face down cards are the ones that you would also hold in your hand. It's your own supply of items that you could sell. And so that's to give you a picture of like how it looks, how vibrant it all is. And so now, finally, going on to the cons, the stuff we didn't like about Bargain Quest.
So I'd say probably one of the things that can be a little frustrating in this game is if you do start falling behind, it does sometimes feel like you might fall too far behind in comparison to some of the other players, right? So there's not really a strong comeback mechanic directly in the game, so to speak, right? There's nothing that explicitly would allow a player to just immediately jump far ahead of any other players in that sense. So it's a good thing, because it means that someone can't keep snowballing a victory that they have or a win that they have. But it also runs the potential issue of if you just keep getting unlucky on every single draft, that you just get bad draft hands and the other players are just getting really high tier, high card items for them to utilize. You can't, sometimes it can get that feeling like you can't get back into the game. So I would say that I've played quite a few games with my siblings and others. So I did find there was a couple of games where that did feel like that would come into the game. It's a little bit of kind of just the luck of the draw in that sense. But there is some strategy involved of like maybe you were making the wrong decisions about deciding to go for a particular hero that likely everybody else was. But that's also part of the comeback too, is like if you want to come back in the game, one of the only ways to really make a difference is to make money off of the heroes. So there tends to be an expectation that players will typically go for the higher cost or like the heroes with more money on them. So there is an element of sometimes that being a factor. But as we said, there are a number of random elements in the game that can help alleviate that situation, with the unlucky roll or like the flip of the card when they go out adventuring, where somebody's like, oh yeah, I'm totally set and I'm going to make even more points off it. And then they roll the one that makes them lose an item, and the super OP item that the guy is going to use to win ends up failing them or something like that, right? So there are ways to get around it, but I would definitely say that's one of the things that we did notice playing it a lot, that it can happen in games, right?
And actually, I would say on that point, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think something that might contribute to what you're describing is the way the points are scored when they're adventuring. And so that's actually my biggest con against the game, which isn't fully bad, but I would say it's my strongest con because it's what kind of stuck in my mind the most when I played it those initial times, where, you know, we have that build up to like doing the right display, getting the hero we want, selling them items, getting the money. They're ready to fight and hopefully get us points. But then the points are rewarded or calculated very simply during the adventure phase, right? It's just compare their attack to the monster's defense. If you did more, then he wounded the monster and you get a point. And then you compare the monster's attack to the hero's defense. If it's less, then, or if their attack is less than the defense, then your hero survived, you get another point. And so that's basically it, right? It's simple, and that's, I would say, the one like saving grace to it, that it keeps the game going and not bogged down in, you know, a lot of calculations just to figure out points. But I would say the simplicity also hurts it, because it's that feeling of like, okay, we built up to this point and they went adventuring, and now I get a point, I get another point, you know. And it's like, and that's all it is, right? And I think the thing is, it stuck out to me because it wasn't like in other games where you have varied number of points, right? Maybe it's like, you know, you did this much more damage to the monster, so maybe, you know, like if the difference is greater, you get that many points. You know, it's not varied numbers of points of like 3 points for doing this, or you get a bonus 2 points for hitting and doing this. It's literally just whether you get a point or don't get a point. And that's kind of how it can lend to what you were describing of not being able to catch up, because maybe this round I got 2 points, next round I got the 2 points possible, where then both rounds you just got 1 point and then the 1 point, right? So then I'm literally twice as many points as you by that
exactly point. And the tough thing is, because those points are worth in the monetary value, they're effectively worth 10 gold, right? And kind of thinking about it from the economics of the game, right? If you're getting into it, like if you're having to calculate how am I going to make up those points, I would need to sell that much more gold, or I need to make that much more gold off of heroes in order for me to catch up to you. Where is that possible? Sometimes with the hero display that shows up, it may not actually be possible, right? There are situations in which the board doesn't change at all. And so you're literally just behind because there's nothing you can do about the situation, right? Just because there's no more gold to be made off of those heroes and adventurers because they suck.
Yeah, and I think, and so like what I was saying too, just another word I would use to describe it is, it just, that one phase, the adventuring phase, is what feels anticlimactic, right? You had like the excitement we were describing from the drafting, and then the simultaneous play in the display phase, and then also how much money you can try to swindle out of the heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And then even in excitement slightly in like the beginning of the adventure phase of giving the random buff or debuff, but then the actual fighting part, which you would, I mean, again, you're not the hero, you're not actually fighting.
Not the focus, yeah.
So maybe, you could maybe rationalize it like, oh, I mean, but I'm just a shop owner and I hear that they fought and that they survived, so it's like, that's as climactic as it is, that fighting part. But I just kind of wish it was more climactic, since in my mind it is the fighting phase of the game.
Yeah, and like there could have been ways that they do it, and I do think in the expansion they start trying to do that, because there are certain items that do directly or indirectly provide additional potential benefits or options to the shopkeepers, right? If the hero owns a certain type of item that lets them deal extra damage, or if they wound, then that shopkeeper gains a victory point, or gains something else, like gains money. Or I think I mentioned the card that if they die, then you make money off of their death, right? Kind of thing. So there is, I think they started to mitigate that, but at the same time, like, just because we're talking about the base game, that was definitely one of the things. I would say the other one that I know we were saying how it's nice to have the upgrades to the shop, which are nice. It also doesn't sometimes feel like it's that helpful or impactful, in all honesty, in playing the game too, right? Like, they're not as strong as one would feel, or it doesn't feel as significant an upgrade, especially the level 2 upgrade when you upgrade it the second time. At least in the ways that we play the game, where yes, the upgrade is strong, or like it's nice to have sometimes, but especially like the second level of it, most of the time, a lot of like we've played the game, we're like, it's not worth spending a point just to get an extra thing because everybody else isn't doing it, right? So it's like, I don't really need that extra edge, so I don't need to upgrade more. So maybe if everyone started upgrading, then you might want to upgrade again because the edge is lost. But you still have a lot of the opportunity of playing and manipulating the cards that you already have, right, in hand and stuff. So I would say the upgrades themselves to the shop, because there's only 2 to the actual shop itself, are somewhat lackluster in that. So again, the expansion actually adds a third one, which makes it a lot more fun and interesting, but that concept is still kind of there.
Related to that, not exactly along the same lines, but I do think they're like thinking of that kind of anticlimactic adventure phase. Like, I think something that could also have made the game overall keep its excitement a little more would have been like, stronger bonuses, basically, right? Whether it is the shop upgrade or maybe an employee, like basically scaling everything up more, because I do think of a game like Rising Sun. Oh, it's right there.
Hey.
Where like, your clan's power feels so powerful, but this is definitely on my end just a really small gripe against the game, because I know it's hard to design a game, especially if you already had a vision for it, to then be like, okay, now scale everything to be even more powerful and still work in a balanced way, right? So I definitely understand that. I just think that would have been something to help maybe keep the excitement going, where it's like, where when you get a hero, it's not simply like, oh, because I can make this amount of money off them, but it's like, oh, because their ability is so great. And it's like, oh, but my opponent got this hero who's like, yeah, I'm not going to sell to them, but that power is also really great. Where most of the times, like I mentioned, the buff debuff, the boon or curse, right? Or even like the equipment sometimes, maybe most of the time, are just small adjustments to stats, and so just a small gripe.
And and I think that's also because I think for us, we tend to like games with a little bit more complexity involved with them, which maybe we'll get into late soon. But it is also remembering that this isn't supposed to be a hardcore strategy game, right? So I do caution myself on that too, of like this game isn't supposed to be taken hyper seriously like a Rising Sun, which you do want to spend quite a bit of time, because there is a lot of investment involved with being able to win the game. This game is, as we said, like with the number of players, maximum maybe 45 minutes when people know how to play. I think when I was playing the games, once we were all very accustomed to the game, we were doing like 20-minute rounds of the whole, like 20-minute full game cycles, because we knew exactly how
Wow.
the game played, how it worked. So we could just power through the turns. And the longest time was really effectively deciding displays and deciding what to put on display, which is like maybe a couple minutes, and then calculation of damage, right?
Yeah, like so
Because
both,
doing math
yes.
is hard.
So so yeah, what you mentioned is kind of the reasoning I had in the back of my head against those two small graphs I had too, right? Where like the simple calculation and kind of the scaling of the powers, it all keeps the game to a level of like family game, right? So it's more
Exactly.
accessible for more people, which is also fitting for the theme, right? It's not like some dark serious theme either. And it all kind
Although
of
a lot of
adds.
heroes do die, so it's also kind of
They
funny
do
to me.
not survive. Yeah, so but it all lends itself to being more family weight, which I think is what they aim for. Like most in general renegade games are not like super heavy adventure games, right? They're meant to be picked up very uh, easily by a lot of people. And so yeah, small gripes. My last small gripe, this came up before our video, and I said I would mention it because I proved you wrong, or you failed to prove me wrong. Was so backtrack a little bit. One small good thing is, since I haven't played the game much, to prepare for this review, I simply had to look at the back of the rule book, which has a reference for every phase of a round. And so this is great. Like, I love when games do this, because then I don't have to like prepare to teach someone or anyone by like flipping through to the right section of the rules to be like, oh yeah, and then this phase followed by this phase where you do these things and look for small rules. It's just a quick overview on the back. If you've played it before, you could easily pick it up again just by looking at the back of the rules. And then again, these same phases are written on the bottom of your shop card. So you don't need like necessarily a reference card of this for every player, right? You just go through it one round, refresh your memory on it, and then you can just recall the name of the phase and you'll know what to do. So that's like very well done and very intuitive and easy to use. But then the one thing I did grab about, and this is me caring about theme though, I care a lot about theme. It's that the class icons John described as being associated with like the fighter, the rogue, cleric, mage, and cleric, those I think are just names we give them because those are the default classes that have that specific symbol. But then in the rules, I think, and John did look through before this video, they don't actually name those symbols. There's no like legend somewhere or key saying like, oh yeah, this icon is meaning fighter. Like when it shows up on other heroes, you can be like, oh yeah, that hero is a cleric and a fighter. No, you can only say technically it has the red symbol and the yellow symbol.
Yeah.
Which then is a little like a small thematic disconnect for me, where it's like I want to be able to say like, yeah, that hero is those two classes, which I think is how they determine what icons go on which heroes, right? Like people who play fantasy games will know, like say a paladin is a cleric and a fighter. And so, but in the rules specifically, they don't actually name those class icons. And so I'm like, why? That's a small thing. I mean, unless I missed it in the rules, but John searched through too and didn't
No,
see it. But
I
I'm
looked
like,
through it as well. Yeah, all it does is say it's called class icons.
yeah,
Basically, is what they're called. So, and I think as Ben is saying, it's I think for people who are gamers or play RPGs, these types of styles of games, or D&D or tabletop games, you'll recognize and you'll know what these classes are, and why the associations are that way. But yes, they don't actually have a name for it. There's no official listing that red is this, blue is this, green is this, yellow is this. It's just that, again, right, for the first time you play this game, you use the base heroes, like the basic hero cards, which are, they only have one symbol on them, and the names are kind of the classic hero, or like the classic classes that you would use in these styles of these fantasy RPG style games. which is rogue, fighter, cleric, and mage, right? So those are the standard words, which is why someone would normally intuitively, like if they play these types of games, pick it up. But for a new player, it really is just symbol association, right?
So yeah, that's my final small con against the game. It'll probably just take 1 or 2 points off the score.
Mine is neutral. So mine is neutral. I think it makes sense. Like it makes sense because I know.
I mean, I'm just saying
this
game.
I know the code and jargon.
This game was a 10, but now it's an 8.
Wow, that point, that 1 or 2 points is a lot more points than you said.
And so overall, before we get to the scores, I do want to say like the production is great. Like I think with all Renegade games, like really solid. Like this box is like solid, thick, full art, like vibrant, colorful, really evocative of the theme itself, right? Especially that artwork, like looking into the shop of all the goods. And then I already showed some of the shop boards, like really good quality, right? This folding cardboard, but it feels solid, full art inside, the front of the shop with the logo, right? A lot of like, I think a lot of it has that like brown too, which is fitting of like the setting of the game. And so in a way, even though it seems like a brown border, to me, it doesn't seem like wasted space art-wise. It all kind of fits with the look of the game. And then even like the monster cards being like this kind of longer, I don't think these are Taro size, but this lengthy size, it's a good change from the rest of the cards, like the items and such that are standard card size. It just kind of helps, right, visualize that this is the boss. This shape of this card is different from the hero cards and equipment. And so we know like what to do with this card. And so those are all small, nice production touches. And I like the theme. I even like some of the humor. Like one of the items is this invisibility cloak. And the picture is invisible. Or nothing, of course. But I think those are just like small little funny moments the game does have.
As a funny side to that, there are some other fun bargain items that may or may not play around with items that are similar in the invisibility cloak, like the invisible cloak. But I will not spoil it if you're gonna buy it.
So production wise, I think great. Graphic design is great, easy to associate the symbols, match what goes where, right? Money, stats, the icons for those. So yeah, it's really well produced. And so going on to our ratings, and John guesses the weight. I mean, I will give my rating first since I'm the one who has less experience with this game. So in a sense, I would say take my rating right now as pretty tentative. It could change as I play it more. Initially, even before we started talking about this, I was inclined to give it a 7.5 and kind of push it up a little bit, like a little more than 7.5. But then after seeing like the pictures of the actual artwork again, which I just really like, and then also going through the phases of like how well the game just flows, I will give it an 8, a solid 8, because it is a game that I do want to play now, right? Like we mentioned it before, right? Of like, this is a game when we get to get together again after all that's happening, like this is a game we should play, And I do want to play it, especially after talking about it again now. And so I think that kind of is indicative of it being more than just a solid, okay, acceptable game. So I would give it an 8. And so, John, what about you?
I think you copied me, cheater. That's how you wanted to go first.
Now you're copying me.
I give it an 8 as well. I think it's we did have some gripes in terms of like the potential balance feel to the game, but again, because this is not a game that's a hardcore serious game in the sense of like you're spending a lot of time and a lot of like thought processing into these games. Like it's supposed to be a lighthearted game, it's supposed to be fast in that sense. Like you're not supposed to be really committing like a hardcore Twilight Imperium strategy or something crazy like that into this game. I think those gripes are while it is a thing that can happen, it's not that big a deterrent overall. Same thing with the upgrades and things like that. Not like could be better. I think they can add more, which they do with the expansions. But with the base game in and of itself, I do think it's a solid pickup. I think it's a solid game that if you haven't played it, or you haven't, we've talked about a couple of drafting games before. If you haven't played a drafting game, this is a great drafting game also to pick up, with a great, as we were saying, great theme, great understanding of how to play the game. It's very simple to learn, and you pick it up pretty quickly, and then you can really just focus on playing the game versus being like, what am I supposed to do here? What am I supposed to do here? What can I do? Right? Yeah, it's very intuitive to pick up. So I also give it an 8. If
Okay, and so now you are gonna
guess
the weight.
2.1.
2.1. Okay.
Because it's a draft, and there is some stuff involved with
so let's go to BGG, Board Game Geek, and see 1.94.
Ah!
So even lighter than you thought.
That's like the third time now. I think things are more complex than they are.
So 1.9. I mean, it's still pretty close though. You're pretty close.
Yeah,
it's just not crossing that 2 line though.
I want that free game.
I know. Good thing. You're not good at this game. And rating wise, it is a 7, which is, again, like, I mean, our rating systems are kind of based on how it is in our own mind, right? I don't always follow like the way it's described on BGG. Like, what is a 7? Good. Usually willing to play. Yeah, I mean, what's an 8? Very good. Enjoy playing. Would suggest it. Actually, yeah, okay, that seems fitting with what we think of it.
Yeah.
But then a 7 average, and then so it's still a solid game based on the Board Game Geek community. And then the final thing is John has mentioned a couple times that there is an expansion. So there's actually 2 expansions for the game so far.
Yeah.
One that either just came out recently or is almost coming out, which is more of a kind of ocean and pirate theme, so adding those kind of fantasy elements. But then the first expansion was the Black Market expansion, which John had described a couple things in it, which I haven't actually played with yet. I clearly have it and even have it kind of prepared in my separate expansion box, but yeah, I just haven't had the chance to play with it. But it sounds cool from what you're describing. I mean, it does sound like more of the same, mostly, but then a few more mechanics on certain cards and such like that. So that's nice, right? If you have a good system already from the base game, you don't need to change too much. You don't need to add a whole other mechanic to it, right?
And that was the idea. It adds some flavor to the inventory of things to choose. It adds a few more employees that are a little bit more unique and special. And then it adds a new shop upgrade, which I think is the biggest, most fun part of it too, right? So it actually does. It's a sizable upgrade to the shop, which is almost a must have once the black market comes into town. The underbelly of the city.
So that is our review of Bargain Quest. Hope you guys will get to check it out. Very solid game. 8 from both of us. Rating of 8. And if you found this review helpful, hope you'll share it with your friends and other people who are interested in the game. And until next time, we'll see you then. Bye.
Peace.